This report provides evidence-based overview of safety of journalists in Ethiopia in the year 2025. It documents safety issues that Ethiopian journalists faced over the year in the realms of personal safety, infrastructural safety, gender safety, identity safety, and legal safety issues. The main goal of this report is to encourage evidence-based advocacy that would potentially lead to coordinated efforts towards protection of safety of journalists in Ethiopia, as well as ending safety issues that Ethiopian journalists are facing. It also encourages coordinated work towards ending impunity of crimes against journalists that this report has documented. So its importance cannot be overstated. The year 2025 marks a decade of conflicts as well as reform processes in the country. 2025 marks exactly 10 years since the protest in Oromia that toppled the EPRDF started. So we can say that the decade since 2015 has been a very tumultuous decade for Ethiopia, with huge implications for Ethiopian journalists. Because of continued conflicts, as well as reversal of some of the legal reform processes that happened in the early days of the reform government, journalists are at high risk than ever. The state of media and freedom of the press in Ethiopia remains very dire in 2025. We've recorded incidents of intimidation on journalists and also harassment over the phone and also physically. Several journalists were arrested and also some were abducted by insurgent groups in different parts of the country. We've also documented gender-based violence, including technology-facilitated gender-based violence that are perpetrated against female journalists. Especially journalists working in conflict-prone areas are also subjected to harassment both by state and non-state actors. The methodology captures various internationally acknowledged approaches to assessing safety of journalists, as well as contextualizes that to fit Ethiopian situation. Hence, using this methodology, data was gathered from journalists, human rights defenders, as well as media association leaders through interviews, workshops, as well as recorded incidents. While the methodology categorizes safety issues into personal safety, infrastructural safety, identity safety, as well as legal safety, it also gives special emphasis to gender safety that Ethiopian journalists face. We employed localized mixed approach to ensure that data that is gathered from various entities is accurate, as well as has the proper depth to inform this assessment. For this assessment, our team conducted interviews and consultations with more than 76 journalists and media representatives, as well as association leaders from 12 regions. Data from these sources is combined with assessment of or review of legal frameworks, as well as other reports from different organizations, to give us a broader picture of the state of media as well as the safety of journalists in the country. So, what are the findings? This assessment shows that the state of media as well as the safety of journalists remains volatile in this country, and it is deteriorating from time to time. First of all, physical safety of journalists is under huge threat. At least one journalist has died while on job, and also more than 43 journalists have either been abducted or detained by security forces. We have also witnessed raids on journalists' houses as well as media offices during 2025. And this had huge implications on the mental state of journalists who take extra caution to remain safe in their homes as well as at their workplace. Digital surveillance as well as cyberbullying was rampant during 2025, and this was perpetrated both by state and non-state actors targeting journalists as well as media houses because of their reporting and journalists' workers. This has created an environment of fear among journalists that were interviewed for this assessment, and it has also contributed to continued self-assessment and self-censorship whenever they plan to produce stories. Third, the Ethiopian media law, which was recently revised, has created huge concern among journalists and media associations because it concentrates huge power in the executive. But also, law and legal frameworks have also been exploited to target journalists. Journalists were charged with terrorism, intending to intimidate them and silence voices. We've also witnessed weaponization of the law throughout the year. Finally, impunity has become the norm. Almost nobody has been held accountable for crimes committed against journalists. And this has created a cycle of continued harassment against journalists as well as crimes against journalists. And this includes not just the state actors, but non-state actors, including businesses and corporations. A recent trend in this regard is abduction of journalists, including from their homes, by unknown and unidentified assailants. Media houses and journalists are also subjected to financial threats because of punitive taxes, withheld advertising, as well as the consequences of detained media houses on the day-to-day operation of their media platforms. Further, women as well as disabled journalists face significant challenges in their workplaces. Compared to 2024, 2025 has seen increased digital harassment as well as legal intimidation that journalists have faced. Physical harassments have also been significant. The main drivers remain to be conflicts, political tensions, as well as geopolitical dynamics that we've seen in the Horn of Africa. There are some gains actually because of backdoor advocacies that were done by human rights organizations as well as media associations, but also there needs to be a full implementation of protective laws that are in place. Financial threats as well as intimidations coming from authorities as well as businesses and corporations, there is a growing environment of self-censorship among journalists and media houses. The state has not also institutionalized safety protection for journalists, and protection of the safety of journalists usually depends on the goodwill of people who sit in government offices rather than the institutions and the legal frameworks that are put in place. This makes it a very dangerous process and unreliable for sustainable resolution of the challenges that journalists are facing. As a recommendation, the government primarily needs to end impunity of crimes that are being committed against journalists. It also needs to institutionalize legal protection and also institutional protection for journalists in the country. There also needs to be acknowledgement that strong journalism strengthens the state, and also that contributes to the national interest of the country that the state is promoting. The state should also end arbitrary detention of journalists. It also needs to stop the exploitation of security as well as national interest to intimidate journalists and create a state of fear among media professionals. In addition to institutionalizing the protection of safety of journalists, the state should also ensure that there is a dedicated desk that brings together media stakeholders, international organizations, as well as the security apparatus, so that they can work together for the protection of the safety of journalists. It also needs to ensure accountability of people who commit crimes against journalists. Media organizations and associations that are based in the country should also establish a system of safety protection for their journalists, training in safety as well as mental health for journalists and also the media staff. The consortium of the safety of journalists needs to also coordinate with media houses to establish a system by which they can advocate for the protection and safety of journalists in concert. The Consortium for the Safety of Journalists needs to also put in place a multi-scalar approach for advocating to the safety of journalists across the different echelons of the government, from the bottom to top. It also needs to establish a mechanism for providing training for journalists for their protection of safety, both physical and psychological safety. Media houses and media associations need to work together to establish a protocol for safety of journalists, both for physical and also psychological support that their journalists need. They also should work together to advocate for the safety of journalists and their protection. International partners and donors need to also acknowledge that this is not just an Ethiopian issue, but it is a global imperative. So they need to support continuous monitoring and capacity building in Ethiopia, as well as support evidence-based advocacy and also protection of safety of journalists in the country. Despite these challenges, we can also see that there is way forward, and also there is light at the end of the tunnel. For example, the establishment of the Consortium of the Safety of Journalists shows that there is a potential for collaboration and also local ownership for the protection of journalists in Ethiopia. By focusing on prevention, local ownership, as well as multi-stakeholder coordination, we see that there is a potential for overcoming these challenges and also ensure the protection of journalists in this country. The protection of safety of journalists is not a favor that we do to journalists, but it is an important ingredient for democratization in this country. The 2025 assessment of the safety of journalists as well as the state of media in Ethiopia shows that it is a challenging time, and also journalists are facing significant challenges emanating from different sides. We can either accept these challenges as norms or also work together to end them. The safety of journalists is the safety of good journalism.